Josh Klipp. I am the founder and principal of Made Welcome, which is a consulting firm focused on accessibility at workplaces and events. I am a recovering attorney. I like to say I spent over 16 years in the public sector working for various government agencies specializing in the ADA. I left litigation to start my own consulting practice, which is Made Welcome, and I also am a certified access specialist through California's Division of the State Architect. My current clients range from state and local governments covered by ADA Title II, as well as large retailers such as Starbucks, covered by the ADA's Title III. And I also teach a certification course on event accessibility. Well, if a student can't understand the lesson, can't speak with their teacher, or can't interact with their classmates, they're not having an equitable educational experience. And I think back to my own childhood experience attending a grade school in the Texas Panhandle, where a large percentage of my classmates spoke Spanish at home. And most of my classmates had a decent grip on English, but in hindsight, I'm acutely aware that they probably had to work 10 times as hard as me to understand our lessons or complete our homework. I also remember being out on the soccer field with my classmates, and because I couldn't speak Spanish, it was harder for me to be the best teammate that I could be. So that inability to communicate smoothly impacted both Spanish and English speaking kids. Just as an aside, my dad was the principal of that grade school, and he instituted Spanish lessons for all grades. And that's pretty remarkable because I think this was in the 80s. So I think back on that now and realize how ahead of our time my dad was, and what a difference those Spanish lessons made in fostering a sense of community and friendship with my classmates. So I'll also note that my school was a private school, so the legal requirements that we're going to talk about didn't necessarily apply there. Public schools and universities are subject to the ADA Title II, as well as the Civil Rights Act of 1964's Title VI. So if you're a private school, but you receive some sort of federal funding, then you're subject to the Rehab Act, at least as it relates for this conversation to captioning for people who are deaf or hard of hearing. So if the ADA Title II applies to you, then you need to meet those WCAG 2.1 AA success criteria that I discussed earlier. If the Rehab Act applies to you, then you need to ensure what's called effective communication. What is or is not effective communication can vary depending on the person who needs or requests it, what their specific communication needs are, for example. Certainly, if you are able to meet WCAG 2.1 AA captioning related criteria, I think it'd be hard to argue that that isn't effective communication in this context for people who are deaf or hard of hearing. We'll note that in the past, AI captioning has been pretty terrible. But AI has evolved rapidly in the last few years, and AI captioning specifically has evolved by leaps and bounds, especially during COVID when we were all meeting online. So for anyone out there who thinks I'm saying that AI captioning is as good as human captioning, that's not a blanket assertion that I am making. For a moment about Wordly specifically, as an AI captioning and translation service, I will say that personally, Wordly has made an impression on me. Prior to my coming across Wordly, my experience with AI captions was that they were laggy, glitchy, and had a really inexcusable word accuracy rate. It was just generally kind of embarrassing. The first time I used Wordly, it was at a conference that featured it for their presentations. I was quite honestly really surprised by its accuracy and real-time synchronization and even its ability to caption heavy accents. I personally had never seen anything like that. Now, I didn't love that the conference I was at had chosen to include Wordly only on the conference phone app, because this meant I always had to look down rather than be able to watch captions in the presentation at the same time. That was a choice by the conference planners. I will note that Wordly does offer and have the option for projection, which is where I think its utility in grade school and university settings is so important. You don't want to be looking at your phone while trying to take in a lesson. You want to be able to read the captions and catch the visual presentation and even nonverbal cues of your teachers and professors. On top of that, Wordly has an option for transcripts, which I think is amazing. You can just imagine the power of having access to transcripts to help with your studies. Even students who don't need captions can benefit from that. I think, for example, of students who maybe have no issues hearing, but perhaps they've got a learning disability. And so for students who need a little extra help, something like transcripts for them could be a game changer in terms of their education and success. Online learning, and especially with the AI capacities that we have right now, translations and closed captions should, at this point, be a given. And again, if you are a school where Title II applies, there are those number of success criteria that captions should be able to meet. So again, 99% accuracy, including spelling and grammar, synchronization, descriptions of sound other than speech, identifying speakers, etc. And the Title VI component means that you layer translation services over these success criteria. For private schools subject to the Rehab Act, you still have the baseline of providing effective communications as well as complying with Title VI. There are a number of ways to achieve this, some of which may feel prohibitively expensive, for example, in-person captioners. My advice to schools who offer digital learning is to weigh your options in terms of your budget, but also look carefully at WCAG 2.1 AA's captioning success criteria. What service meets this criteria? What best meets your budget? And then I'll add that if an AI captioning service meets those criteria and can provide translation services, this is probably the most affordable, streamlined, and scalable service for you. Well, the penalties for noncompliance can really vary depending on the circumstances. How many people were affected? How long has this been happening? How many complaints were lodged? What was done about it? What wasn't done about it? But it can be as brutal as a bruising lawsuit, maybe even a class action, with potentially debilitating damages. Again, depending on the duration and the action or inaction of the educational institution, that can be very, very expensive. But lawsuits aren't the only potential consequence. These days, all it takes is a few negative posts on social media to go viral, and that can be enough to send a school into damage control mode. And the costs of this aren't always quantifiable, but can be just as lasting and damaging, quite frankly, as a lawsuit. As for why schools and higher education should care, the mission of a school is to give those kids, those students, the best possible education to help them go out and succeed in the world. And providing these captioning and translation services is a way of doing that, of fulfilling the mission of your promises and obligations to each and every student, regardless of where they come from, regardless of a disability, to make sure that everybody receives the same quality education to make them the best human out in the world after they leave that school. I would also circle back to the story I told about my own experience with with attending a school that where a number of students spoke Spanish, and how our ability to communicate with one another impacted us either negatively or very positively. And the more that we are able to seamlessly communicate, the better we're going to be as friends, as classmates, as teammates. And again, that's important not only in that educational setting, but also in our lives going forward.